thought we were insulated. I mean, everyone in Highlands and Cashews always said, oh, you know, we're beyond the market. Well, when the banks weren't actually giving any money and the Fed had come in and eased, market trends came home very quickly. So anyway, at that point in time, I did get really lucky. I immediately began doing some solar in the TVA area. So the Tennessee Valley Authority reaches into northern Georgia, western North Carolina, across Tennessee, and to some of the other states. And they had a program, because TVA is a quasi-government utility, immediately through DC, it was applied that they would purchase the REC, so the renewable energy credit. So when the renewable energy asset produces energy, it also has what's considered an attribute that's tradable or sellable. And so that attribute for that solar array could go to a business or a federal government agency, et cetera. And they didn't own that green attribute. So they've actually gone compliant, but necessarily isn't on their site or on their property. And so had a nice run of doing the very first school in North Carolina. We took 5 acres. The school then got a contract from us, $25,000 a year for that 5 acres for 25 years. And they immediately saw this as an opportunity to hire back this teacher they had just let go for 5 acres of land to have solar on it. And then we did the same thing for 18 farmers, where we had 18 farmers that turned over 5 acres. We built 1 megawatt solar arrays. And for these 18 farmers, most of them easily in their 60s, 70s, or 80s on 80 to 200 acre farms, the thought of leaving this, there's no children basically that are farming, so the thought of leaving the land to, you know, the people who would inherit the property if they were to pass, really what they saw was this land's going to be lost because they're not going to be able to pay the taxes on it, and they're not going to be farming it, so this is sort of the last generation to have a farm. And it was nice. So to see 18 farmers get $25,000 a year for the next 25 years, they saw that as an opportunity to really shore up having the taxes taken care of and maybe give it some reprieve or an opportunity for the family farm to stay in the family for some time beyond that. And then I thought, I live in Habersham County, so if anybody knows, you know, where, I'm going to say the word, but no one up in Habersham or White ever goes there, but Helen, Georgia is near there, so, but we don't claim it. So, so Helen is near there, and I decided that I was going to try to do some stuff back home, rather than getting in my car and driving, you know, an hour and a half north and northwest every day. And began talking to Tallulah Falls School, Raven Gap McCutcheon School, White County Schools, Habersham County Schools. The same thing had done in North Carolina, I wanted to do in Georgia. And I hit the wall of monopoly, began receiving cease and desist letters from Troutman Sanders, the representatives of Georgia Power, and the EMCs, who are our electric membership co-ops, and our electric cities called MEAGs. So some cities are actually, have their own utilities. We often, as a society or as people, or as I'll apply it to myself, and I'll make the assumption that it also applies to others, because I often get the sense from people that they think that the MEAG or the electric co-op is benign in some way, that they're not like Georgia Power. But on the front lines, I will assure you, utility companies do not like competition in any way, shape, or form. And there's some really unique realities that don't necessarily pair with a tangible and physical reality that the utilities have narrated across the state. And it was interesting. My first caveat was to reach out and speak to a public service commissioner. So I was told if I wanted to address Troutman Sanders and address Georgia Power, that I would need to retain a lobbyist and go down and talk to one of the commissioners. And so I did, and I heard my commissioner's name was Bubba, and I said, oh, I said something else, but I will dumb it down. Really. You know, we'll make it really peaceful. But anyway, I said, how in the world am I going to be meeting with a utility commissioner named Bubba and think I'm going to get anywhere? His name is Bubba McDonald, Commissioner Lauren Bubba McDonald. And I will tell you, that meeting took place 5 years ago at the Hollywood Diner in Hollywood, Georgia. There is nothing in Hollywood, Georgia, but the Hollywood Diner. And so Bubba and I are actually the best of friends now. And he told me that day
he said, son, if you want me to support the solar industry, and if y'all know Lauren Bubba McDonald, you know this is exactly how he sounds. If you want me to support solar industry, the solar industry, you're going to have to do it in the best interest of the ratepayer, making sure there are no state or ratepayer incentives, and that in fact no upward pressure on electric rates. And I told the commissioner that that wasn't being done anywhere, and that in fact Vogel wasn't being built that way, and there wasn't a coal power plant that had been built that way, or a natural gas facility that had been built that way. That in fact we had assessed environmental compliance fees or CWIP, or the federal government come in with some kind of loan guarantee, and in fact it was going to cause upward pressure on electric rates when they go live. If anyone knows this, if you don't, I will fill you in on Vogel. So, and he said, but that's not what I'm here for. I'm telling you this is how we want solar to be done. So I said, Commissioner, I will do everything in my power to do that for you. And a year and a half later, and I continued to work with him, there was during that year and a half, we had to go around and re-educate virtually everyone in the state on the municipal level, and a lot, any legislators here will see me. They thought I was crazy until last year when we won against the company, Georgia Power, and deployed an additional 525 megawatts of solar using no state, no ratepayer incentives. And in fact, every bit of the new solar deployed immediately causes electric rates to go down. So it is a big win. And it should be on the front page of every newspaper, but utilities really doesn't want this to happen. But I'll go back just a little bit. So a year and a half later, Lauren Bubba McDonald, telling me about that. I brought him a project over in Social Circle, Georgia. So it was 300 acres of spent land. It had been a cotton farm. They were bringing in a reservoir. The soil was spent. The reservoir barred them from having any cattle or poultry. So this music producer out of Nashville, Steve Ivey is his name, said, I'd like to do something. I'm thinking maybe solar. And I said, well, let me take a look at the property. And it just so happened it had a substation and some transmission lines right through it. And it was a brilliant place for solar. We ended up engineering a project that to 30 megawatts and brought it to the commission and said, we actually can do this now. We can deploy using no state incentives. So the legislators don't have any pressure on them to have to come up with additional incentives to throw towards solar. And in fact, no ratepayer incentives either. When it goes live, no electric rates will go up. And we can do that right now. So it took Paul Bowers and Tom Banning and the Southern Company. We had a meeting at the Southern Company, and the whole executive team was there. And Mage Solar from Dublin here was also in the room. And if anyone doesn't know that, there is a German solar company that invested in Dublin, Georgia, and they have panels out of Georgia. Mage, M-A-G-E, Mage Solar. And so explained to the company that we could do the project, and I said, we really need 16 cents a kilowatt hour, and they leaned across the desk and said, well, we're not going to touch it unless it's 15 cents, so pull up. I said, well, congratulations, this was 12 and 3/4. So we then had to come out with a program. It was a first come, first serve. Luckily, I put people, the rules was whoever got in at 9 o'clock. What's that? Slower? Whoever could get in at 9 o'clock. So, it was however many submittals. I don't know how many people were on the stage, pushing the button at 9 o'clock. We got in. That 1 month ago, we cut the ribbon on the Simon Solar Project. 380 acres of solar, Simon, over in Social Circle, Georgia. There isn't much going over there, but the blue will in, so this is a good investment for the community. $90 million investment for Social Circle. When solar goes in, it causes no expansion requirements for police, sewer, schools, water service, fire. Typically, when a large investment comes to a community, they have to backstop that investment by expanding services. So we asked for no tax abatement on that project. We wanted to show that solar not only can deliver no upward pressure on electric rates, but also be a real value to these communities. Especially land. Over 53% of all the land that is farmland in Georgia is not even being used as farmland. So that then led into being able to show the Public Service Commission that by making some taking out some of the arbitrary language that was put into the contract that rose the risk profile that was unnecessary. If the sun is no longer coming out, paying the notes on the asset is no longer our problem. So just understand, I mean, so once we were able to figure that, we showed the commission that, in fact, we could cause downward pressure on electric receive no incentives. And pairing at that same time was Dublin High School here. So Dublin High School is the greenest school in Georgia. Just have this nice, you know, Dublin, green, Lefcon, great school. And so it took 18 months, 9 lawyers, $500,000. A lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of really smart people, led by John Grinnell. If anybody knows Troutman, Arnold Goldie Gregory, John Grinnell, brilliant guy. And we've developed a contract that, in fact, is replicatable across the state and across the entire footprint of the Southern Company and other utilities. And one of the things that the Territorial Act of 1973, which is the law that's on the Georgia books that actually allows for utilities to have monopoly rights, that's 1974, assigns the ability for them to sell power. So if you can develop ways in which to deploy that don't contemplate the sell, what you end up finding is that there's really nothing they can do to prevent. So what we have is a contract that went through a lot of pains and a lot of effort. This school is now using the energy from the array. I cannot express this. I mean, if you could live in my world, I don't have a life. So I do that sleep from 2 to 4 in the morning. The rest of the time I work 7 days a week. I love it. I get tired, but I love it. And when the home or business or school, municipality uses the energy directly, they receive immediate benefits. If the energy goes to the utility, that now binds that house, business, municipality, school to buy all their energy from the company continually. So the energy coming from the utility continues to increase year over year. So if the energy isn't being consumed, released, lowering their demand, then the value of the solar, so people can feel good about going green, but in fact the dollars that would have stayed in your pocket don't go to your pocket. So to me, this is an economic issue. It's an economic driver on a family by family, business by business. And you would never think that a solar guy would be against a solar bill. But I do have some issues with the one that is going to be pushed for through next year. And if anybody wants to do this really quickly, you can check any of these numbers. It's brilliant stuff, but it's simple. You can do it on your fingers. If anyone wants to draw 3 little houses on a piece of paper, one house does nothing. The typical house in Georgia uses 1,150 kilowatt hours per month, and we'll use a 2% escalator. We're really sustaining closer to a 4. That's a report directly from the Public Service Commission by Jamie Barber. But house, 1,150 kilowatt hours, 20 years. This home is going to spend $60,000 for energy over 20 years. If they install a program and the utility puts a solar on the roof, and that energy goes to Georgia Power or the EMC or to MEAG, this home now is bound to purchase their power. So there's a credit for the solar, but at the same time, they're still purchasing their power. So that saves about 10% over a 20-year period. But the contract is a PPA contract, was power purchase agreement. Power purchase agreements by IRS law, regulation rules, I don't know what the IRS says, but you cannot assess a future price to the asset. So in other words, it has to be fair market value language. So after you've signed that, at the end of term, it's the fair market value language that has to be assessed at that time for the price of that unit if you want to purchase it. So understand that, just so happens, it's called the Tiger Team, by the way, over in Alabama, that figure this out. People can feel good about going green. They will. We put more solar onto the grid. But in fact, the 10% savings ends up just so mirroring the buyout fair market value, and they actually get the finance charge on top of that as well. So the company gets to get people go green, they actually make more money. If the person does it through a program like we did at Dublin High School, where they can consume the energy on site and they have ownership, and they actually can use the tax credit and all this stuff on their own. That same home, over 20 years, saves $35,000 in utility costs. To me, on a home-by-home, business-by-business, town-by-town basis, this is economic issues for Georgia. It is green issues.
I hate to break in, but I don't know how much time we have. That high school, is it completely off-grid?
No, it's still left it interconnected. The reason is we don't have net metering laws in Georgia. So typically in a state that has net metering, you would overproduce. And so in other words, you would put onto the grid during periods of time, and then when the sun goes down, you would actually be buying back from the utilities. So you're participating in some way, and the utilities would arguably, through the legislature and through the Public Service Commission, argue that they would want a fee for that service of being able to add to the grid and all. We don't have that. It's called fair market value. Called avoided cost number is what we have here. So they would want to pay you roughly 5 cents for that solar energy when it goes to them, and then when you buy it back, charge you 12, 13, 14.
Can they get away with that though?
Yeah, they can get away. The legislature would have to address it. These are complex issues. In my opinion, there's lots of opinions. In my opinion, not everything has to be an all or nothing scenario. Like I'm a Buddhist, so middle road. We can size systems, and we have an installer actually right there in the back that's working really, really hard across the state to try to do this. We can size systems for taking care of immediately right now, daytime and peak. That's your biggest bulk cost, daytime and peak energy costs. So about 60 to 70% of your total electric could be done with the solar and not have to worry about putting it to the grid. And then the company still gets to participate in that sense, and it doesn't